first, let me apologize that I cannot be there in person. So I would then also thank my fellow reviewers, John, Elizabeth, Giacomo, Igor, and Tibor, for sharing the work. And so, as you can also see, they are covering a broad range of expertise. So, and I then report on behalf of this panel our findings and recommendations on the HSF metadata paper. Okay, so the paper is titled Constraints on Future Analysis Metadata Systems in High Energy Physics. You can also find it here on the archive. And the paper is basically accepted for publication. So yeah, there's on the chat a question, can people hear me okay? Can somebody maybe write in the chat? Yes, okay, great, thanks. Okay, so yeah, so the paper is basically accepted for publication. So this also means the review then did not focus on finding typos or things and smaller things in the paper, but more looking ahead. So what are the next steps? So I put here also on this slide the abstract, and just want to read this one sentence. Correctly applying metadata is a crucial and often time-consuming step in an analysis, but designing analysis metadata systems has historically received little direct attention. So that's really what the paper now addresses, the design of metadata systems, in particular for analysis. So it starts with some introduction discussing types and scopes of metadata. Then motivations are discussed. There are sociological factors, aspects of analysis, preservation, and bookkeeping. And then it comes to more technological considerations like metadata formats, repository structure, access interface. And yeah, so the main part maybe, or what is mainly intended by the paper is then to give technical specifications. So this is split then into requirements and then features that are desired or some other consideration. And then it's finally summarized. So we also got some guidelines, what to look for. Are the requirements, specifications well stated from a technical viewpoint? Are the requirements, specifications complete? Are there missing use cases, requirements, specifications? And is it worth identifying the systems in the paper title? And should the requirement specifications be factorized and associated with those systems? So you see, it's a lot about requirements and specifications. And so our general comments are listed here on this slide. So we much appreciate that the analysis metadata topic is addressed for the first time by a community-wide effort. So I mean, certainly there were efforts before, but to do this now in a community-wide effort and do this systematically is very much appreciated. And also the paper addresses many aspects that resonate well with reviewers. For example, reuse or data preservation, things like this. So that was nice to read. On the other hand, the paper seems to be more a summary of a discussion and an overview of selected current implementation approaches than a formal determination of requirements. So, I mean, as you have seen, we have also IT experts who also look for a more formal determination of requirements. So if one wants to give this to somebody to implement the system, that's something that would be needed as a next step. So it is a first step towards and provides valuable input to more formal requirements engineering process that should be tackled next. So that's what we think. And so, also we have a few suggestions then how to address this next step. It's important then to provide a detailed discussion of use cases and describe what problems should be addressed, not what the solution is. So often we have some solutions in mind, some existing solutions that maybe work well for the cases that we want to address now. And of course, then there's a tendency to also think in these terms of the solution of existing systems. But it's then better really to avoid mixing the discussion of the design of the system and how it is used. So really first define the problem and then talk about the solution. Also, we think that the metadata scopes definition should be sharpened. And then, when the requirements can be derived from the use cases. So once we have the use cases, one can then derive the requirements in a more formal way from this, and probably also assign them to metadata scopes. So I will come to that, to the scopes. That's also very broad, and maybe not all requirements apply to all metadata scopes. And then also, as this is community effort, we think it's important to discuss the arguments for or against common solutions. So this could mean common solution across metadata scopes, but also across experiments. There are maybe good reasons to look for common solution, but maybe in some cases there are also good reasons to have separate systems and to make clear what arguments one has there. We think helps to then come up with a good design. So metadata scopes I mentioned already. So on the paper, 4 metadata scopes are defined: analysis metadata, dataset metadata, time-dependent metadata, and file-dependent metadata. And also it's here then attached to several examples that were given before. So if you look, some analyses here, like 7, 4, 5, and so on, are also listed multiple times. So this already indicates that maybe the definition is not yet that sharp that we can uniquely assign these examples then to one of these scopes. So and for example, analysis metadata and analysis-oriented dataset metadata are also 2 different things. A similar way, information about features of a dataset and how it is then used are also 2 different things in our opinion. Also dependency, there was given this time-dependent metadata, but the dependency may not be on time only, but actually run experiments. Maybe that's meant by this, but also here one can probably be more explicit. And maybe instead of calling it time dependent, one could categorize it as data that it's needed for event processing, but not part of the event data. Also, one question that came up: should the data be interpolatable or not? Is this important or not? Then concerning metadata scopes, we have the following recommendation. As I said, recommend to sharpen the definition and also then general applicability of the metadata scopes. And for this, we suggest to take a more conceptual, abstract view on the metadata scope. And here we list some questions which may help to get a clearer idea of what one understands under these metadata scopes. So in the strict sense, metadata means it's data about data. So here one can then also be explicit about which data. Do we agree about which data it is, or can we even say at all that it is about some other data? If not, maybe then it's not metadata in a strict sense. This also relates, of course, on what does the metadata depend. For example, is the metadata known at the time of data production, or is some further data needed to produce this metadata? This can, for example, then be important for the decision whether the metadata should be stored together with the data or not. How is metadata produced and by whom, and how is it used and by whom? This might also help to then define scopes of the metadata. Who's the owner of metadata? It's maybe not so much about scopes, but then more maybe about the design of a system. Also here, for example, the owner can change also over time. This is something one has to consider. And in general, yeah, there can be relations between different levels of metadata. Also here, we think it's good to be more explicit about this and yeah, how these relations then can also be handled. Okay, so yeah, then some further. So this was specifically focusing on metadata scopes. What we also discussed several other things in this review, and so here I list some of them, and yeah, so they might or might not also be useful then for further steps. And so one thing that was discussed in particular is relocatability. It was given as a requirement. But is this relocatability and the distribution of metadata to multiple sites really a requirement? Or is it something that we have some solution in mind, and then this is what we think should be a requirement? For example, there was a discussion about caching, so some centrally maintained metadata instance with caching. Does it solve the problems that we have, or what is really the requirement that requires, or the use case that requires relocatability? Another question is, how important is it to have correct metadata for partial data sets? Also, the evolution of metadata schemata, API versions, software tools handled. What are advantages, disadvantages of storing the metadata together with or inside the data versus cross-referencing several metadata objects? Are Monte Carlo datasets fundamentally different from measurement datasets? And what are the requirements and solution of experiments other than the LHC experiments and Bell? So there was a bit the feeling that it's focused, the paper is focusing on these experiments. So yeah, then our final recommendations are given here on this slide. So we strongly encourage the community to continue systematic and coordinated effort of addressing the metadata structure, tools, access, preservation, and reuse. So it's really a big challenge. See, it has several aspects. We strongly appreciate this effort and encourage its continuation. Then the term metadata is used for many things. The valuable discussion of metadata scopes in the paper should be continued to reach an even clearer definition and common understanding of metadata scopes. So I think that's important that we really then agree here on a common language, common understanding. And then a more formal collection of use cases and determination of requirements would be the desirable next step. And we very much hope that HSF will take care of the problem ownership and make sure the next steps are taken for the benefit of the HAP community. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Hope you hear the applause.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And also very much you're sticking very well to time. So we have, I think, in a very useful and incisive review. So and clearly establishes that this is the start of a conversation. But perhaps conversation. Let me, now that they're finally able to, is there anyone on first who would like to? No hands. Hands in the room.
Hey, Thomas, thanks for the overview there. I wondered, do you sense that there's a bit of a tension between asking, on the one hand, the group that are looking at this to be more abstract and general, but on the other hand, to sharpen definitions? I mean, it seems that there is an issue that can very easily get maybe wrapped up and too focused on specifics from a particular experiment. But if you talk too generally, you actually end up talking to nobody. So how do you see that in terms of where the paper is now and where you think the discussion should evolve?
Yeah. I mean, for example, if one looks at analysis, metadata, so what is it really that this is? I mean, is it, for example, about what data is it? Is it data about a data set that was used for an analysis? Or is it metadata about the final result that was obtained? So we had the feeling that there's a bit of mixture, maybe what people think is analysis, metadata. So in that sense, I think it's maybe not that one should define in terms of specific solution what this is, but I mean, come to so what I think would be good to go through these questions and try to answer them. And this can probably help then to say, okay, this is one type of metadata, this is another type of metadata. So that's maybe a step to address this.
Thanks. I mean, I guess maybe one idea would be to do the abstract definitions, but then give concrete examples with reference to experiments.
Right. Yes. I mean, that's also very good point. Yes. Yeah. In the end, you also want to have use cases, and ideally, you then also have really a one-to-one correspondence of I mean, you can really say, for example, I mean, here there were several examples, and for some it seems not clear where they belong. So that might tell us that maybe also we have different ideas of these scopes, or maybe also the examples contain several aspects than metadata. And to be clear here, I think helps to then also assign the requirements to these metadata scopes, because probably not all requirements apply to all scopes of metadata.
Hi, Jonas Remser from CERN. I have one maybe more question to understanding things here. So you were mentioning that one open point is, should metadata be interpolatable? What exactly do you mean by that? And how does that question influence the discussion on how metadata is stored? Because isn't it just up to the user if they do interpolation?
Yes, yes, yeah. So, I mean, for example, you could think of temperature, that you measure some temperature at certain points, and then you want to interpolate this. And yes, I mean, the question is really, okay, should this then be up to the user to do this interpolation, or yeah, should this be done by some expert? And then the next question is, of course, where do you put this? So probably some expert write some code for the interpolation. Where do you put this in the system? Do you consider it part of the metadata system or not? That's maybe what one has to then clarify. And yeah, maybe there are also different opinions where this should be. But yeah, it's probably good to then have a consensus or whether this is needed as part of a metadata system or not. Maybe the answer is no, but yeah, that was one point that was discussed, that this interpolatability can be an aspect of this.
Okay, I think we can take one more question. Mike?
Mike Sokoloff, Cincinnati, LHCb. So looking at the author list, I'm wondering, do you have this? I've got two sets of questions really. One is, of course, more specific. So do you have liaisons with LHCb, Alice, Dune, and other experiments, EP, on one side? And on the other side, have you consulted with scientific data experts outside of high energy physics?
Okay, so maybe that's then more for the authors to answer. So I mean, yeah. So we haven't checked what's the background of all the authors, but yeah. I mean, for example, from the reviewers, also we have people like Igor from Intensity Frontier. So. And yeah, probably, I don't know, probably, yeah, LHCb, I think, was also mentioned in some cases.
We have representation on here from, and this included people who spoke in meetings from all of the LHC experiments, from Bell 2 certainly, I think from neutrinos, etc. Yes, so I mean, it's always a task for the working group to bring in the voices, and I think in the continued conversation that would certainly be a priority. But yeah, I think it is. I think we can say thank you to Thomas again and move on.